Welcome everyone. I wanted to put out a high quality presentation, so we're going to do it on this topic right here, comparing the 2024 diesel pickups that are on the market right now and which one I would buy. Stay tuned and enjoy. We will start with the 2024 Ram 3500 HO Cummins in a 4-door short bed in the tradesman model. As you can see, it came out to $71,060 approximately for the estimated MSRP, and the HO Cummins came out to $12,595. These are some of the images that the builder did generate. As you can see, it's a pretty attractive looking truck, but it is pretty basic. Interior does look nice. These new trucks do have very nice basic interiors. For approximately $7,000 more, you could pick up the Bighorn Sport Edition with that HO Cummins. As you can see, I did have a little trouble with the builder being a little bit glitchy. You can see the wheels aren't there. I think it's a little bit more attractive, and if you're willing to spend that extra $7,000, it might be worth doing, though I think the Dodge has a very basic appearance, and we'll get into that later. As for pros and cons, the engine is very familiar. It drives like a lot of 6.7s always have since they came out in 2007 and a half. The Ram chassis, both leaf sprung and with 5-link coil suspension on the 2500, which you can't get the HO with. Handles very well, handles weight very well, tows nicely, very stable platform. The truck has great brakes. The exhaust brake is good with the automatic. However, it doesn't compare to the G56 6-speed that the Cummins lost in 2018. That was the best exhaust brake in these light-duty trucks. And this does have Hydro Boost. Now, for the cons, the cost of the HO Cummins is pretty high for what you're getting. The torque controls really limit how well the engine drives. You really can feel how not sporty this truck feels when it doesn't have a load on the back. Ram needs to replace both the 68 RV and the Ison with better transmissions that are stronger, more durable, and they can turn off torque controls and really get some power to the ground. The platform is very old. It looks old. I have a hard time paying for the higher trim levels. That's why these lower trim levels are what I'm recommending. The Ison drives rather clunky. It is definitely not sporty at all. Works okay for a work truck, but it definitely isn't. It doesn't really scratch the itch of what a light-duty truck has become, which is rather sporty and enjoyable to drive and can work hard. Moving on to the 2024 Chevy Silverado work truck 3500 L5P Gen 2 Duramax crew cab short box 4-wheel drive. As you can see, it came out to $67,915, built like this, which is on the cheaper end, and I think that this would be a really nice truck for a lot of people. Here's some of the options and their prices. You can see that the Duramax was $94.90, not too bad. And here's what it looks like. I think it's pretty appealing. The only thing is I don't like that split face front end. And the interior looks really nice. These, like I said, the base trim trucks look really good. Now, if you want to move up about $7,000, the LT trim with the Z71 Sport package looks really nice with those new LED headlights. Definitely recommend looking at that. That would be the model that I would go for. Now, as for the pros and cons of the Gen 2 L5P truck, it has good all-around drivability in this Gen 2 motor. Not as impressive as the HO Powerstroke, but it's as easy to drive as the standard output and previous model 6.7s. It has a very unique appearance, which you can only get with the GM truck, and especially with these one-piece headlights, they look pretty good. It does have a Hydro Boost brake system, and overall, it's a really pleasant truck to drive, and by far the best GM truck I've ever driven. Moving on to cons, the independent front suspension has many weak points and doesn't improve the overall ride to offset that loss of durability. The 10-speed calibration on this specific truck does share the transmission with the Ford with a few changes, and it's a little clunky in this truck. The engine seems a little numb off idle when you first accelerate, and that could be potentially a combination of turbo lag and that the engine might produce less torque without the boost than the 6.7 that I'm used to. Now, moving on to what I would buy from the Ford camp, this is a 2024 Ford F350 XL STX HO Powerstroke in a 4-door short bed. This would be just like my current 7.3, but with an HO, and it does come out to $76,000 at this trim level. This would be a very similar truck to the one that I already have, except for with the HO Powerstroke. Here's some exterior views. It definitely looks awesome in the red. You can see a theme. Definitely the red is really tickling my fancy lately. I just love the exterior look, and the interior looks just like my truck. I really like it. Works great, does everything I need it to do. Now, pros and cons for the Ford. Ford has the most horsepower and torque with that HO Powerstroke. Does have a solid front axle, just like the Dodge, though it is a stronger front axle than the Dodge. It has very appealing base and high trim levels, so if you guys want to have high trim, they look good too, but I really like these base models. The base levels offer analog and more simple systems that I like compared to the high trim trucks. The high trims offer a load of tech for those wanting to have that tech. Four-wheel drive switch is on the right side of the wheel, which I prefer to the GM truck, and the normal column shifter that I prefer to the Dodge, and it has extensive aftermarket support for driveline and suspension systems. As for cons, the V8 diesel is still very easy to drive, but it's not quite as smooth as a Cummins. Inline sixes are extremely smooth. Usually towing fuel economy with a V8 is going to be a little bit less than a Cummins with an inline six. That is an inline six. The bigger fuel tank options would be nice on the Ford. I think it needs bigger than 48 for a long bed. I think the 48 should be in a short bed. And like I said, they should offer a larger one in that long bed. These trucks don't have Hydro Boost unless you get a dual rear wheel. So an F350 dual rear wheel or an F450, which is a dual rear wheel. So I think that that's a huge loss. You can really feel the difference in braking performance compared to the Chevy and the Dodge. Not in like the output, but the feel at the pedal. Now, what truck would I buy? For me, the Ford still wins in quality, solid axle over the GM, and the HO Powerstroke would be what I'd buy, and its appearance at a price point that I think is very reasonable. The GM, I would happily own a Gen 2 L5P. I think it drives really awesome. They look really cool when you have the LED headlights that are one piece instead of the upper and the lower portions, and it drives a lot. The GM truck drives a lot livelier and more fun than the Dodge. For these reasons, it is definitely the number 2 spot for me. Number 3 for me is the Ram. It hasn't changed much, and the platform largely looks the same as it did 5 years ago. Ram did update the interior design and tech, but that really isn't a selling point for me. The chassis is tried and true. It does handle very well, tows very well. Much like all the previous 6.7 Cummins automatic trucks that had the ICE in some cases, and the 68, Ram is missing the wow that gets buyers to buy something new. They need a new automatic transmission that is stronger and able to transfer the Cummins power that we know the engine is capable of. The best exterior look for me is found on the Bighorn and the Laramie, the Night and the Sport packages, which are really expensive. They approach 80 grand and over 80 grand. To me, the truck doesn't look as good as the Fords and the GMs, and at that price point, I would buy the cheaper Ford that to me looks better, with a better performing engine. Also, the HO Cummins runs basically the same price as the upcharge for the 6.7 Powerstroke HO, which you get a lot more power and torque. It's going to make a big difference, and to me, I'd rather pay 12 grand for the HO Powerstroke. So I just don't really think that it's worth it. I do own 2 Dodge Cummins trucks. I have an 03 Cummins and a 12 valve and a first gen. I like Cummins trucks. I like the motors. Just these new ones aren't doing it for me. Taking a look at the specs of the 6.7 Cummins that comes in the Ram pickup trucks, the HO Cummins comes with 420 horse and 1,075 foot-pounds of torque. Standard output is down at 370 horsepower and 850 foot-pounds of torque. Both have a water-cooled turbo, and they have, since 6.7 came out in 2007.5, and both have an air-to-air intercooler. Taking a look at the Gen 2 L5P, it makes 470 horsepower at 2,800 RPM, 975 foot-pounds at 1,600 RPM, has a water-cooled turbocharger, and all Duramaxes have had a water-cooled turbocharger. It has an air-to-air intercooler. Make sure to watch Gale Banks' performance video on the Gen 2 L5P. It's very interesting. Exhaust is routed conventionally, unlike the Ford, which we're going to talk about for a minute. The Duramax has always had up pipes that come out of exhaust manifolds that are in a very conventional way of a V8 engine mounted on the outside of the block. The up pipes route the exhaust gas back toward the turbocharger, which is in the valley, and then the exhaust has to come back out the turbo. I think this is the main reason why this engine has a little bit more turbo lag and just feels a little bit numb on the bottom end. I really think that has a lot to do with the way that this engine has the exhaust routed, which definitely there is a delay in getting the exhaust gas to the turbocharger. Last but not least, we're going to talk about the 6.7 Powerstroke. The high output version makes 500 horsepower and 1,200 foot-pounds of torque. The standard output makes 475 horsepower and 1,050 foot-pounds of torque. Both are very impressive, and obviously the standard output is still extremely competitive in the in the group of trucks here. Both have water-cooled turbos, except for the HO, to my understanding, has a water-cooled compressor housing as well as the water-cooled center cartridge. Both have an air-to-water intercooler. Now, the biggest difference that I always liked about 6.7 when it came out was the way that the exhaust is routed. The exhaust on a 6.7 comes out of the valley and goes straight into the turbocharger, and then your exhaust would obviously leave the back of the turbocharger. The green circles on the outside of the heads is actually where the air goes into the motor, so it actually breathes through the valve cover. The valve covers on both sides, so it's radically different from the Duramax has ever been, and I believe that this makes a big difference toward preventing turbo lag, and I think it's just a really nice design and very logical. I think Ford stepped out of the box a little bit here, and it has paid off since this engine has been in production since 2011. It's been pretty well received, and a lot of people like it, including me. So for these reasons, I would probably select for my main choice a high output 6.7, which is what I selected in my F450 that I ordered. However, the Chevy truck is quite a nice truck, so if I can find an excuse someday to own a Gen 2 L5P, I will definitely do it. If you guys want to like and subscribe and help support the channel by doing so, maybe someday we'll be able to get a Gen 2 L5P on the channel to compare side by side with 6.7 Powerstroke. Thank you all. Have a great day.